You have reached the Geek Elite. Good luck.
Hey there, Screen Beans. Have you heard about Screen Snark?
Rachel, this is an ad break. They aren't Screen Beans until they listen to the show.
Fine. Potential Screen Beans. You like movies and TV shows, right?
I mean, who doesn't? Screen Snark is a casual conversation about the movies and television shows that are shaping us as we live our everyday lives.
That's right, Matt. We have a chat with at least one incredible guest every episode, hailing from all walks. We've interviewed chefs,
Writers, costumers, musicians,
yoga teachers, comedians, burlesque dancers,
folks in the film and TV industry,
and more.
We'd be delighted for you to join us every other Monday on the Certain POV Podcast Network.
Or wherever you get your podcasts, fresh and tasty off the presses.
What? That's not...
Can I call them Screen Beans now?
Fine.
Screen Beans!
So tune in and we'll see you at the movies or on a couch somewhere.
'Cause you're all Screen Beans now.
She will be mine. Aurora.
John, you okay there, buddy?
Pain medication.
Welcome back for another shift on the Geeks Watch. This week we are back talking about Loki on Disney Plus, Episode 2, The Variant. And I don't know, do we get some surprises, everyone?
No.
No surprises.
Not really.
Not
No,
one
not really.
whatsoever. John?
I'm happy, though.
The only real surprise is that stuff is happening much sooner than I thought it was going to.
Fair.
That's fair.
Yeah, I did expect it to be at least one more episode before we found out who the other Loki was.
I don't think we actually found out who the other Loki is. I think that's a
We'll
misdirect.
talk about that.
So yeah, we will have to talk about that. Before that, as always, though, we're going to get into our week's watch. So Elizabeth, what did you watch this week?
So it's been a mission of Mitch's to get me to watch all of the Fast and the Furious movies before Fast and the Furious 9 comes out. Now, I have had a reprieve because they kept pushing back the date in 2020, but the time has finally come.
I mean, honestly, we had an extra year. We should have watched it in that time at some point.
I didn't really want to watch them.
You honestly don't have to watch them before we watch the other movie. It's shoot them up with cars. You're really going to be missing any story points?
You say that whenever I make this statement, like, I don't really want to watch it. But then every time I go to not watch it, you're like, oh, no, you need to watch them before Fast and the Furious 9. So far, I've gotten through 2 in the last couple days. The first one was good. I feel gypped on the second one because there was no Vin Diesel.
I mean, I really am finding out something about Elizabeth and this obsession with Vin Diesel, but okay.
I don't see. I mean, isn't he supposed to be what the entire series is about?
I mean, the series is about Vin Diesel and Paul Walker, and then Paul Walker unfortunately passed.
Mm-hmm.
Fair. So I guess the time I started paying attention, it was just Vin Diesel. So I thought the entire thing was about him. I was very confused as to why Paul Walker was relevant.
I heard the only reason Vin Diesel even came back was because they offered him, because he wasn't in, the next 2, really, is, hey, if you please come back to the franchise, we'll give you the rights to Riddick.
That is true. He did get the rights to Riddick, but he didn't want to do any sequels after Riddick, or after Pitch Black and Fast and the Furious. But I honestly think that he kind of came to, they're not offering me original roles anymore. So because was it Man Apart didn't do that well. The one where he played a lawyer, like a defense lawyer or something like that nobody even knows about. Yeah, exactly.
I don't think I could watch that.
Yeah, so
It's probably his most successful movie. He plays a tree.
His most successful. Well, no, the Fast and the Furious movies are really successful.
They are.
I mean, I would hope so. They're doing the 9th of it. Like,
And the
That's right.
10th, and then the 11th.
Yeah, they're filming the 10th and 11th back to back.
you mean I have to keep watching these things?
You don't have to watch anything.
You're going to want to go to the movies and you're going to want to see these, so I'm going to have to watch them.
No, she needs it so she can be like, now we're going to watch this musical. And he's going to be like, and then you're going to be like, Fast and Furious. And he's going to be like, okay.
Thank you, Jessica. I need to keep my eye on the prize. Eye on the prize. Yeah, no, I don't know. The second one, I liked Paul Walker's character better in the second one, but everything else was less interesting in the second one for me.
Mm-hmm.
There wasn't quite as many twists and turns. There wasn't. It felt almost tired.
So I'll tell you this: going into the first one is the director is Rob Cohen. He's made a lot of movies, but he's not a household name. People don't really know him as a director.
Okay.
The second movie was directed by John Singleton, who more often than not made movies like Menace to Society, Boys in the Hood, like a lot of the showing what the inner city was for black kids. So him doing this movie was definitely a step out of his usual comfort zone. But that's the reason why we get Tyrese Gibson in the movie.
Makes sense. Okay, that makes a lot more sense, because I was like, all of a sudden Paul Walker was from Barstow, and I'm like, wait, what? What did I miss?
So then the third movie is going to be directed by Justin Lin. Justin Lin is going to make this movie. You'll see that it's completely different than the other two movies, like in all the ways.
Tokyo Drift, right? It's the third one. That was the first one I'd ever seen.
If you've ever seen the live action remake of Initial D, or the anime Initial D, or the manga Initial D, you're going to see that a lot of the story points are taken from that.
Oh, okay. Didn't know that. I'm going to have to find Initial D.
Then after that, like, it's because they don't use a lot of big stars in that one, it makes a lot of money, especially overseas.
Okay.
So they stick with Justin Lin, who's going to start. Like, number 4 is kind of a reboot to the story, but not really. Like, you're going to get back Paul Walker and Vin Diesel. And you're going to get back a lot of the people from the first movie, but then he's going to bring in new people from the other movies. And that's where the franchise becomes super successful.
Yeah.
With 5, you bring in The Rock, and now the franchise just kicks into overdrive.
Yeah.
And it makes all the money.
Is that the name of the...
It's
just called Fast 5.
Oh, okay.
It's fun. It's just fun after 4. It gets just really fun and enjoyable.
Can I get there? We need to get there.
5 is going to be your favorite movie. I can tell you this right now.
Yeah.
You specifically.
Wait, is 5 the one with the runway?
No,
Or is that 6?
that's 6.
Okay, all right.
So
In
5
Brazil.
5 is a heist movie,
Okay, yes.
and
5
that's
is
why she's
great.
going to
Yeah.
like it.
Yes.
6 is
Definitely more me.
6 is an Avengers movie.
Yes.
Like, it's literally the Avengers.
Okay.
coming together.
I'm here for this.
Yes.
Okay.
7 is, we need to fight this guy who is the ultimate bad.
Yes.
And then 8 is our hero becomes the bad guy.
Yes.
Oh.
And 9 is who knows?
We don't know. 9 is we're going to space.
So what you're saying is I
Cars in
just have to get
space.
through the next 2 and then it gets better. For me.
Yes, for you. You might like 4, but 5 is the one that you're gonna like.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that's what I have to
So,
say.
audience, stay tuned, because so far I'm...
Well, by the
I'm-
time we record the
I'm
next
going
one, you
through
might
it.
have already watched all of them plus
Well,
the new one.
I would have had to have watched all
Yeah.
of them plus the new one.
Maybe. We'll see. We'll see if you make it that far.
At this point, we've been talking about me having to do this for a year and a half. I just want to get it done.
Okay. Well, I guess we got 2 more to watch today and 3 more to watch tomorrow.
I can watch one Monday, one Tuesday, one Wednesday.
Okay.
Okay.
There it is. The Fast and the Furious from 2001 when they were stealing VCR TV combos.
That was entertaining. That was the other thing is I am sure when it first came out, those were really great looking outfits. But looking at them now, I'm like, oh God, what were we thinking?
What did we do and why?
You know, and I remember when they first came out because I watched, I think, part 1 at the Plaza 5 theater.
Oh.
That just tells you how old this thing is. And Yeah, I distinctly remember, from the moment that movie came out to this overabundance of people trying to put body kits on their Honda Civics and just things getting really annoying on the road from that point forward.
Yeah, for me it was the I think the biggest one was the platform like flats or the platform flip-flops that were just all over the place, and I was like, I remember those.
Broken ankles everywhere.
Broken ankles all the
everywhere.
time.
Yeah.
And then the really tiny sunglasses. Where everybody's got like the teeny
the
tiny
razor
square sunglasses that barely cover your
Definitely don't do anything for UV protection.
I'm like, oh yes, I remember that look. Not a look. So that's the Fast and the Furious.
That's
1
the
and 2.
Fast and the Furious 1 and 2. Okay. Jessica, we're going to jump to you. What did you watch this week?
Okay, so the musical I think Elizabeth needs to make Mitch watch next is going to be Lin-Manuel Miranda's In the Heights.
In the Heights.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Just to cut you off. The first 2 Fast and Furious are available on HBO Max.
Yes.
Oh, okay. This is also available on HBO Max and I think theaters everywhere.
And in theaters, that's right.
But I was introduced to Lin-Manuel with Hamilton, I think like most people, and then started listening to all the Hamilton soundtracks, and then you get In the Heights soundtracks mixed in on your playlist, right? And I'm like, this music's good. And I was like, why don't I know about this one? So In the Heights was Lin's introduction to I guess his big introduction to Broadway. Okay. This also won Tony Awards just as much as Hamilton. And it takes place in his neighborhood, Washington Heights. And it's about this Latin community within Washington Heights that's dealing with gentrification. So when, those small businesses go out and bigger businesses like Starbucks comes in and your rent goes up, but you're still making the same amount of money.
Oh, yeah.
Kind of thing. So it's really a lot about that, a lot about neighborhood and a lot about neighborhoods within New York and just
Subcultures.
So it focuses a lot on Latino culture, which is something like I'm not part of, but I grew up around. So I think it was a pretty good representation of all the differences between it. Lin-Manuel is a genius playwright or musician, just musical writer. He does a lot of callbacks to a lot of other old musicals as well. Like, of course, I think West Side Story he calls back to, like, Of Course You Have To.
I would assume
and
too.
then there's another one, All That Jazz, I think he calls back to. There's a bunch of Easter eggs in it. I didn't even catch them all. And just the rapping / musical and just constant upbeat. The characters are all very well written and interesting. Very well written female characters as well, because Lin-Manuel's really good at writing for the female. And yeah, I enjoyed it. I don't want to give too much away because I know Elizabeth wants to see it, but I really enjoyed it. I love the music from it. I've been listening to the music from it. And the lead is played by Anthony Ramos, and he is also in Hamilton too, as well. He plays Hamilton's son, I think, the one that gets shot. And this place he's the lead, so Lin-Manuel's original part, and Lin-Manuel is in it. He's got a smaller part of a he sells shaved ice. Paraguay, I think is what it's called, but I feel like I'm saying it wrong. It's been a while since I watched it like a week ago. I think it's Paraguay, which is a special, I think it's Puerto Rican shaved ice. I don't know. Correct me if I'm completely wrong, and I'm sorry if I'm completely wrong, but yeah.
I also heard there's like a lot of cameos.
I don't know. I was so absorbed in faces and me. I was so absorbed in the story. I didn't really notice the cameos. I think my mom said Jennifer Lopez's first husband or Mark Anthony is in it. And I was like, that's him, because he looked not how I thought he looked. So, and
I heard Stephanie Beatrice shows up. If Detective Diaz from Brooklyn Nine-Nine.
Oh yeah, she is. Okay, that was driving me nuts because like that can't be. she's playing like a complete opposite of her Brooklyn Nine-Nine character, and I'm like looking at her like, I mean, yeah, I know she's an actress, but still, I'm like, wait, no. That's like...
Have you ever seen the like those interviews where she uses her real voice as opposed to her Diaz voice? And
No.
it throws everybody because it
Is that her real voice?
Yep.
And oh my gosh,
I don't know if
love
that's what it is in the Heights, but I'm sure she uses it instead of her Detective Diaz voice. But yeah, everybody is usually really thrown because they think that's how
I
she
love
talks.
it. She plays like a salon girl, basically, like a hairstylist.
Yeah, that's
and
her real
it's
voice then.
Just such a such a not stereotypical, because it is real to the neighborhood and how they are, but it's just like she's like the salon girl, and to see her go to that from like Diaz, what I know her from, I'm like, whoa, that's cool to know that it's actually more like her real voice, at least.
So I don't know if you really wanted to bring this up, but I don't know if anybody else has heard about the controversy around the movie at this point.
I have heard that there's not a lot of Black Latino representation.
There's no Afro-Latino representation, and there's no dark-skin Latinx representation. Everybody's kind of light-skinned. Like, Jimmy Smits is like the only dark skin.
Yeah, that's not really for me to have an opinion on. Like, but there was one lead that was dark skinned. That he had a pretty decent role. But yeah, I think when it came to like them panning out about all the different Latin communities within this one huge community, I don't remember a lot of dark skinned people in that scene. So
yeah, I just wanted to
there is a controversy.
Make sure that's known. It's definitely interesting, and obviously Lin-Manuel is not one for not representation. Yeah. And this is directed by John M. Chu, who most recently directed Crazy Rich Asians. So obviously that was a big part of representation too. So that is on HBO Max. Is there anything else that you wanted to talk about with that?
I kind of sort of started The Alienist, and then I had issues with my TV turning off. So, but I was enjoying it.
Well, it's not about aliens. The Alienist is a Victorian crime drama.
Yeah, it's basically the beginning of profiling. Serial killer.
It's actually really good. I watched the first 2 episodes.
The book is really good. I read the book. The show looks really good, but the book is excellent.
And what a cast. I mean, Daniel Bruhl and Luke Evans and the older sister.
Dakota
Fanning, thank you. Yes. Yep, that was originally on TNT, now it's on HBO Max. John, what did you watch this week?
All right, so to give you guys an idea first of the little adventure I went on, I had to have a little oral procedure done. Not the kind that Batman avoids, but more tooth-related. And I had to work it in there. You know me. So anyway. I love that. Yeah, so this meant I took some time off from work. And as a result, and probably in combination with some of the pain meds, I feel like I slipped into another dimension of time where everything slowed down. And I watched quite a few things during this past 5 days. I watched the part 2 of In Search of Darkness, the Shudder exclusive documentary about horror films.
Which John and I watched
through the whole thing.
The first one about? I said, which you and I talked about for the first one in an overtime?
Exactly, yes. Which, more of the same. I'm not going to complain about it because I like the first one. This one just kind of covers a few kind of lateral things. Like they speak a little bit more with Tom Savini to a couple of the Scream Queens like Linnea Quigley. If you've ever seen Return of the Living Dead, she's the redhead that dances naked on the tombstone. She had a pretty prolific horror career. They talked to Barbara Crampton, who's one of my favorite Scream Queens from the 80s. And she actually goes a little bit into like the personal history of, being the it girl in horror movies and then kind of aging out of the roles and not getting any more calls and sort of the bitterness that comes with that. But then getting rediscovered later in life, and not being typecasted anymore and kind of how freeing that can be in some ways.
Can I ask you a question real fast, John? As a horror movie novice, I guess, is there a difference between the final girl and the Scream Queen?
Yes, because the Scream Queen can be, there's definitely an overlap. Scream Queen can be a final girl, but the Scream Queen is usually, just the character that's known for screaming her head off. Like Jamie Lee Curtis has been both.
So you can be a final, or if you're a final girl, you're a scream queen, but not all scream queens are final girls?
I would say yes, yeah, because in many cases the scream queens end up not making it, so it would not be, yeah.
To scream.
Shouldn't have been screaming.
But yeah. Yeah, so if you're in a horror scenario, don't scream. You might make it. Then, yeah, you basically just go into a little bit more. This feels, it's weird because, I mean, obviously the first movie was relatively comprehensive, or first documentary. This one essentially follows the same format where you just kind of go from year to year, from like starting 1980 to 1989. But I don't know. I feel like this should actually just be edited together, where it's like you kind of shuffle it into the first documentary, and it would make more sense. Because, going from 1980 to 1989 in part one, and then from 1980 to 1989 again in part two, you're just covering different movies and different actors. It's like, okay, that's odd, I would rather watch, honestly, I would watch an 8-hour version of this, like reshuffled together, if it was just in the right order.
I mean, the first one is over 4 hours and the second one is over 4.5 hours. Like, I feel like there probably is someone going to make an 8.5 hour mega cut of the two. So just wait for it.
And I wouldn't be surprised if they even go into like a part 3. Like there's definitely enough material, I'm sure. Like all of this stuff from part 2 feels like it was leftover stuff from part 1. So it's like, you know what, I'm sure there's like a 12-hour cut out there that you could make into a serviceable miniseries. And that's what it should have been. It should have been like a miniseries, not like a solid chunk documentary. And then like probably like 10 episodes, like 1 hour covers every movie, and you'd be fine. Or not every movie, but every year. So the whole decade in like a 10 episode miniseries would have been perfect, I think.
Now, is this the documentary that you said they're going to be doing, what was it, 80s sci-fi or fantasy next? I feel like you talked about
It's by the same people, but there's going to be I think Mitch talked about watching one of them also that was specific for like 80s like action heroes in search of a hero, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's basically the same producers are kind of in charge of these. This one's the horror themed one, and then there's going to be In Search of Tomorrow, which is going to be the sci-fi based one.
That one's been in production for a while, hasn't it?
It feels like it's been a couple of years now, yeah. Like I remember hearing about this back in like 2018 maybe.
Well, as I learned from VHS Gems, there is a lot of sci-fi to dig through.
Yeah, you're probably going to fall into a very similar category with that documentary because, I mean, the 80s were just the boom time for cheap horror and sci-fi.
Yeah.
And there's just like so many good things and so many bad things that came out in that time.
Yeah, it's obviously the In Search of Darkness did much better than the In Search of a Action Hero, seeing as how the action hero wasn't 4 hours long and they didn't get a sequel. So
yeah, did they talk to a lot of the 80s meatheads in there?
They did. They talked to, and like Cynthia Rothrock is in there.
Okay, China O'Brien.
Yeah, China O'Brien. They had a couple other people, and I'm just really blanking on who. In Best of the Best, the guy who plays, was it Tommy Lee? I don't remember what the actor's name is.
Oh yeah.
I think they also had Don the Dragon Wilson in there, so it's a good, like, if you like 80s, early 90s action movies, it's a good thing to check out. But it's not nearly.
There'll probably never be another decade like the 80s just for the sheer volume of stuff that was made.
This is true. Like if they do 2010s to 2020s, it's all superhero stuff. So
yeah.
So we'll just have to wait till 2050 for that, which we'll talk about again a little bit later. 2050.
Yep.
Yeah.
Did you have another thing you wanted to talk about?
Yes. So Unfortunately, I wasn't able to make it to your bachelor party. That was very disappointing. But it turned out to be a blessing in disguise because not only did I get to put all of those Vegas funds towards my little surgery procedure I had, I also treated myself with the remaining balance of that to an early Father's Day present.
Ooh.
And I got myself a Nintendo Switch.
Woohoo.
I am in full-on Nintendo fanboy mode again. And I can honestly say I haven't felt like this since probably the N64 days, which, as some of you may know, I also recently bought an old used N64 just for nostalgia purposes and bragging rights. And I showed Daniel that I am, in fact, the better Mario Kart driver than he is.
Ooh.
Suck it, Daniel.
Wait, I have to assume if you got an N64, you've been playing GoldenEye. Like, there is no other game for the N64.
There actually are several other games.
No.
GoldenEye is
Donkey Kong 64.
Listen,
I love
that.
GoldenEye.
GoldenEye was my first person shooter.
I think it was a lot of people's first person shooter.
That game did not age well, man. Like, the controls are so archaic in comparison to nowadays.
The controls on the N64 were just bad in general.
Yeah, that's fair.
The controller was... I mean, but think about it, though. At the time, there was nothing else like it. This is like your first real, like, analog stick, your first real venture into, like, 3D worlds, and nobody knew how to, like, pilot around in that environment. Like, they were figuring out as they went along. Like, they really innovated a lot. And yeah, you started with a weird, like, 3-pronged controller that you couldn't really tell how to hold correctly at first, but... You know, you just kind of went from there, and now we have just a bevy of, you know, controller options, especially with the Switch. Which brings me to my next point. One of my favorite new games is Super Smash Brothers, and they just recently had a Nintendo Direct, which happened during the week of E3, the Electronic Entertainment Expo. And one of my favorite new things, and I talked about this before because I think this happened, I don't know how long ago. But anytime they reveal a new character in Smash Brothers, you have to remember this is a game that started with only 8 characters in 1999, with 4 unlockables, but they were all Nintendo. And with every subsequent iteration, they've introduced so many new characters, even from outside of Nintendo, that every time they announce who the new player is, people lose their mind. Like, when Pac-Man was introduced, like, people were, like, flipping over chairs, like, no way they're getting Pac-Man into this. The last big one was Sephiroth from Final Fantasy VII, and grown adults were screeching like little girls at the thought of, like, that character being introduced. So we just got a new character introduced recently, and by the time this came out, like, everybody who cares would have already have seen this. So, I was actually waiting in the doctor's office for my turn when this got announced, and I was like, no way. They're introducing Kazuya Mishima from Tekken into Smash Brothers.
Yep.
So now we have characters from Street Fighter, Fatal Fury, and Tekken. And I think now we just need Mortal Kombat to round out all of the major fighting games into Smash Brothers. But yeah, there's just so many characters in there now that it's like impossible to keep up almost. But I love it. Like, the fact that you can play as the dog and duck from Duck Hunt is awesome. They're playable characters. They have their own stage. It's literally the old Nintendo stage with, like, the bushy background and the ducks flying in the back, and you can hit the ducks for, like, bonuses. It's crazy. It's awesome. I love it. And they also introduced a new Game & Watch. So Game & Watch, for those that might not know, are the precursors to the Game Boy. They were essentially little LED games with Nintendo characters. They were super simple. And for Super Mario's, I think, 35th anniversary, they released a special edition Game & Watch that included the full first and second Super Mario Brother games in them, which, I mean, technology has come this far now that you can include a full game like that into, like, a tiny little business card-sized, you know, apparatus. And for Legend of Zelda, which is going to be the 35th anniversary of them next year, or this year, actually, we're getting another Game & Watch that includes Legend of Zelda 1, Legend of Zelda 2, and the Game Boy game Legend of Zelda Link's Awakening, which I'll be honest, I'm going to get it just for that game. I literally just got the remake of that game for the Switch. And that's so good. I actually want that other one as well, like the original version in that little portable format.
I actually just played the original Link because if you pay for online Nintendo, which I didn't know this till you got your Nintendo, apparently you have access to Super Nintendo and Nintendo NES games. And I've been just at night just going through them and just, I die. All right, next game. I die. So I played the original Legend of Zelda and I'm like, oh my gosh, like I have no idea what I'm doing.
Oh yeah, no, that was every single kid that rented that game in the late 80s, early 90s, because usually you wouldn't get it with instruction manuals or the maps, so you would just fart around, like not knowing where to go.
Well, there's also a few Japanese games on there that it's just all in Japanese, and I have no idea what's going on, what buttons to hit or nothing. I'm like, what is happening here? I get it, it's a dystopian, but okay, what's this? And then there's one with ghosts in the mansion, and I'm like, why are there a bunch of ghosts? Like, what's happening? I don't know. I need to learn Japanese.
Yeah, that was an unintended bonus. If you sign up for Nintendo Online, you get their little sort of catalog or back library of old school games. It's not comprehensive. There's some that are not in there, like the Super Nintendo one doesn't have Street Fighter. You have to pay separate.
Bubble. I just want to play Bubble again so bad.
But it's comprehensive enough, though, that if you love those old retro games, and I think what I'm realizing from all of this is I'm definitely going into the midlife crisis era of my life right now. Because I'm just really embracing the stuff I liked as a child, like completely again. And I'm here for it. I'm like, you know what? Like, screw aging gracefully. I'm going to fight this kicking and screaming and enjoy some Nintendo along the way.
There you go.
Well, yeah, I mean, a Nintendo Switch is like, if I were to get one, it'd only be to play Breath of the Wild and I guess all the older games that you can get, but I just don't play video games enough, and it seems weird to buy it just to play one Zelda game. So, because I've never been a Smash Brothers fan. Like, every time I've seen people play, it's too much.
It's a lot on the
going
screen.
on. Yeah, it's too much going on the screen at one time, and I'm just like, I'm okay.
I used to think that way too, because like I said, I didn't really play it when it first came out, because that was when I was starting to phase out of video games. N64, I think, was the last system. No, I got a PS2. That's what it was. So I upgraded to like the more modern aesthetic video games at the time. Played a lot of PS2. Upgraded to an Xbox eventually. Was an Xbox supporter for the longest time. I stopped caring about PlayStation for a while because Master Chief. And then things just kind of came back around full circle where, like, I've had an Xbox 360 and I played it. In the last 10 years, I want to say I picked up the controller maybe 5 times, and that might be generous for the Xbox. I just don't care, like I could be doing something else right now with this time, but this kind of just brought it back.
All right. Well, there you go. John and his new Nintendo Switch.
Yeah, not a big fan of how you're supposed to add friends on it. It's not like gamer tags where you say, hey, what's your gamer tag? It's like, now you have to have like a social security number, basically. But other than that,
okay. Is that everything for you, John?
Yeah, also saw the Angry Video Game Nerd movie. That's the less we say about that, the better. And you can watch Into Darkness Part 2 on Shudder. That's
right. It's on Shudder. For my week's watch, I watched the first 3 episodes of Part 2 of Lupin on Netflix. There's 5 episodes in the season, or part, like, because it's Part 1 had 5 episodes, Part 2 has 5 episodes. I watched the first 3. It's a little bit of a departure from what you saw in the first season, but that's only because the first season ends in a way that you have to deal with that in the second. And I'm not okay with it.
Okay.
Like, the first episode back, you're dealing with what happened at the end of the first season, and it's just... And I'm not saying it because I just don't want to spoil it for anybody that hasn't watched it yet, but I really feel like they tell the story in a way that is very... unfair to the watcher or the viewer. Like it doesn't really make sense. And the first season isn't like every episode is a different heist, and this one I'm three episodes in and there's not really any heist yet, so I'm kind of that's what I'm expecting. But obviously they're dealing more with character development in this season, which is fine. Like that's what we're here for, also to do that. Still great. The only other issue I had was that it's felt like, and it might just be my setup, but the audio wasn't as great. So instead of just watching it in the subtitles, the English subtitles, I was doing the English dubs, and the voices for the English dubs are so low in comparison to all the background noises that they have. I don't remember it being that way in the first part. So the second part, I don't know if they did something different or if it just somehow changed on my settings, which I don't think it was. I'm still enjoying it. I can't wait to finish the season, and it looks like they already have plans for part 3. So there's that.
There you go.
Now you all read Lupin versus Sherlock Holmes.
Yes.
Hairlock Shlomes.
Oh, Sherlock Holmes. Sorry,
Sholmes.
Sholmes.
Take a shot.
For Love of Pages. Now,
Yes.
how did they depict the Lupin character in that?
Very well. It was the airlock they got wrong, but
Well, yeah, that's because it's the French writing about an English detective, so it's never going to be particularly flattering.
he's very much the gentleman thief, just cocky, egotistical, and but not necessarily bad, I guess.
Has his own code of ethics.
Yes.
The funny thing is that in this season they mention Sherlock Holmes a lot more. So I don't know if they're intending to bring in a character to thwart him in the same way of Sherlock Holmes in part 3 or the later part of this season or not. And I think the last time we talked about this, I think when Steven brought it up, I was talking about the other gentleman thief in French literature of the Phantom or Le Fantôme.
Yeah.
So in that one, he is okay with killing, like whereas Lupin would never hurt somebody like that way.
Well, that's where the gentleman comes from, is the fact that they don't kill, right?
I think it's more. I figured it was the classy thing. Like
No,
it's wearing a
gentleman
monocle and
thief
stuff like
means
that.
I'll steal from you, but I'm gonna be nice about it.
Well, then there you go. I always saw the Le Fantôme or whatever is also supposed to be called that, but the difference is that he if backed into a corner will kill.
Yeah.
So I don't know. But so I'm interested in if they ever do something with that character as well. But I am enjoying Lupin, and if anybody else is into heist stuff, they should watch it. Okay, let's get into Loki, episode 2, The Variant. So we get to see more of the TVA, and we definitely get an answer to Elizabeth's question from last week in the form that Loki says, it looks like you just incinerate everybody. And he's like, yes. Kind of.
It's just a very nice way to say you just incinerate everybody there.
I'm not really okay with the fact that is in fact the answer, which we all thought was going to be the answer.
But it's.
I mean, I get it.
They weren't supposed to exist anyways?
They aren't supposed to exist based upon some, 3 lizard people's decision about what the timeline should look like.
But they also do still exist on the main timeline.
But
So
it's not
it's like breaking the
them
mirror.
that exists. It's a very complicated free will discussion.
No, yeah.
And
we get into some awesome philosophical discussion in this episode, and I was all for it.
I do
yeah.
appreciate that Mobius and Loki finally sit down and have this conversation about free will versus this predetermined timeline and how this works, because that is the ultimate question I have, and I'm not sure I'm okay with the TVA's answer.
Yeah, I'm not sure I'm okay with 3 lizard people determining whether or not something should happen or
Making
not.
the decisions.
And the TVA is kind of a cult.
Yes.
Only kind of.
Not kind of. It is. You are in a cult.
Hey, but we get the most important answer of all. We now know where Jessica Hyde is.
That's true.
That is true. We do know where Jessica Hyde is.
works for the TVA.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was interesting seeing that in the beginning sequence of the show that she showed up, that actress showed up again. I also want to say that, wow, I don't know if Bonnie Tyler is alive at the moment, but her song of "I Need a Hero"
Yes,
is
she
being
is.
used quite a bit in the last couple of weeks.
Yeah.
It should be used every week.
It should, but this was not the right. I felt like this
Yeah.
fight scene was not the right place to do it.
No, it wasn't.
The song is so upbeat and has a fast tempo, whereas that fight scene is not fast. It is.
It's not.
You
Well,
know,
and
the problem with that scene is that this whole thing was already done better in like Shrek Part 2.
There is no fight scene that goes along with that song other than the Shrek part.
See, and for me, it's always Short Circuit too, when Johnny Five is swinging around on his crane and stuff like that. So, but yeah, it's it just seemed very out of place and not like there's no hero in that sequence. So why
No.
is
Or
it?
is there?
Or is there? That's fair.
Is there?
Yeah, maybe the real villain is the TVA and the lizard people. And what we're seeing here is we're seeing things from the villain's point of view.
I mean, we're supposed to believe that at this point, as we see later on, this is the female Loki or Lady Loki, or whatever you want to call it, a female version of Loki that is doing all the
So-
killing.
Quick note on that. Although she's listed as the variant on IMDb, in the credits, she's listed as Sylvie.
Sylvie.
Okay.
Yes. And that's supposedly, because I didn't know this like offhand, but one of those YouTube things you missed from Loki this week or whatever. That's the name of, or one of the names of a different character known as the Enchantress in the Marvel Universe.
Okay.
That's interesting. We did already have an Enchantress in the MCU. She was on a few episodes of the first season of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., but
But
As
it's
we
not
know,
canon, right?
you know, Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. is canon.
it is canon?
It is canon.
It's a different dimension?
Not a different dimension. And this is the biggest issue I have after
Because it would be wiped out, right, by the TV.
It's a variant.
It's a very...
I mean, yeah, at this point we don't know because that last season of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. really goes heavy into time travel and what that could all mean. And Kevin Feige has absolutely nothing to do with that show.
Correct.
But in the first episode of Loki, when Mobius is showing the death of Coulson to Loki, people jumped on that to be like, well, see, Agent S.H.I.E.L.D. doesn't exist because he doesn't tell Loki that Coulson lives after that. It's like, well, he's not supposed to. Like, he wants him to feel bad. Like,
Yes.
that's the whole point. So I still think Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. counts. Nick Fury shows up in that show. Sif, Volstagg.
Yeah, Sif does.
Yeah, they all show up. So I say that it's canon. I'm not Kevin Feige though, so
I don't know what Disney's stance on it is. Well, what the MCU stance on
Right.
it is. Because I thought last I heard it wasn't. So, or it's...
I mean
out
it's
of it.
possible.
Yeah.
Say, John, are you Googling it?
No, I'm not.
No. I think it's honestly it is until it's not. Until someone specifically says
No.
this didn't happen. So the thing with the Enchantress though is she can change her appearance just as much as Loki can. So
Yeah.
it could be a different actress or they just have a different actress. It doesn't matter.
Could be a different version. I mean, you've got, as we see at the beginning of this, they've fought, 400 different Lokis that all look a little different. So.
Yeah. I wouldn't mind.
That was awesome.
I'm sure there's someone out there with better computer equipment paused it and freeze framed every one of those designations of all those different Lokis, and I wouldn't mind seeing that eventually. I'm sure it's on the
Yes.
internet.
I'll send you that
wish
video.
Okay.
Was one of them a horse? Do you know, John?
Oh,
Huh?
Because in the mythology, Loki
Yeah.
turns himself into a mare
nice.
Yeah.
and then gives birth to, I think it's a 7-legged horse or something like that.
Oh yeah, which
like one
I
of my
think is supposed to be the
favorite
horse that Odin rides.
Yes.
Yes.
It is
Oh.
a horse that Odin rides.
Odin writes his own grandkid?
Yep.
Okay.
Well,
Don't think about that.
Loki and
Just
Odin
go
with
aren't related.
Mythology,
in
man.
that.
Fair.
I like my gods a little depraved.
Well, then you really like the Norse gods and the Greek
Yeah.
gods because they're all a little depraved.
What else did we learn from this episode?
Ooh, we got introduced to Chekhov's jet ski.
Chekhov's, because they mentioned it in this scene or this episode, so thus we need to see a jet ski in a later episode. Is what you're saying?
Yeah.
Yes.
I mean,
Well, it happens twice. At first, Loki, when he's going through his training, which, quick side note, I loved everything about those bureaucratic scenes and Loki going through his
Yes.
tutorials and questions. Somebody freeze framed the multiple choice question that was on his monitor, which I think I'm starting to understand now why I connect so much to this aesthetic. It looks so much like Fallout,
Oh
Yeah,
yeah,
it
it
does.
does.
with the exception that the graphics are more orangey than green. It looks like the kind of shit that you would see on the Pip-Boy and on different monitors throughout the wasteland. But yeah, there's a really interesting multiple choice question on his monitor that says, if Thanos has 2 apples and he eats them both and he's still hungry, can he A, like go back in time to before he ate the apples to eat them again? Or B, like that wouldn't work because if he goes back in time to before he ate them, then they wouldn't be in his stomach anymore. Like, it's this really interesting time paradox, like multiple choice thing. And apparently there was a right answer, but I don't remember which of those options it was anymore. And the fact that he's now wearing basically like just a boring little suit and tie, not even a suit, just like a shirt and tie, and they give him his own little variant brown
Windbreaker or jacket or whatever.
yeah, like his little like members only jacket, which also reminded me of some of the best parts of Portal 2 when they're in like the 70s and everything's got those brown and orange tones to
Oh,
it.
yeah.
I was like, I need that jacket. That's going to be such an easy cosplay to do now. I was like, oh, I'm variant Loki.
That's the part I don't get. Like, as the TVA, you've got all of these times to choose from. Why do you go with the 70s?
I think that's just the most bureaucratic look like you can find.
Yeah.
Like things weren't ergonomic yet, you know.
Yeah.
People didn't think about bad lighting is bad for your eyes kind of thing. It's the most
Just gaudy furniture.
Yeah, it's just this. Yeah, I am waiting for the shag carpet to show up.
Oh, I'm sure there was some shag carpet in that one judge's office. You just didn't see it because they didn't pan it out.
oh,
that
go ahead.
reminded me, Mitch. Mobius. There's a lot of interesting stuff happening in that conversation between him and the judge. Particularly at one point, he tries, Slayer, Renslayer. And at one point, Mobius tries to direct his attention to the 3 timekeepers, specifically to the middle one, and she cuts him off. And then that changes the conversation to something about, oh, she has another agent that works for her, like secretly or whatever. And there's a pen. They says, oh, this must be from your other like secret squirrel guy.
Yeah.
And it says something like Franklin D. Roosevelt High School, I think.
Okay.
Does that
Okay.
mean anything to you?
That does not mean anything to me, but I'm sure for some huge Marvel fanboy that does.
Yeah, I'm just really like, okay, they're throwing all these different things at us. And I know for a fact that the writer of the show made a comment somewhere. He says, hey, I'm just like you guys. I like pouring over all of these details. So have fun. I'm like, okay, so all of these things probably do mean something.
Oh yeah.
But what?
Oh, yeah.
And I'm sure all the stuff that's on her shelf that means something too, as opposed like where she kept her
Snow globe.
Globe.
and her baton,
Yeah.
because she goes to grab it when all the emergency signals start going off.
When there's a 000 threat.
Yeah, which means that was the first one, or is that like the last one that they added in? Like, what do you think? Like, is it at the beginning of the book? If everything goes to hell, call for 000?
I would imagine it's at the front.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, if they have any lawyers, that goes at the front.
So one of my issues with the episode is the time travel. Obviously, when Loki is talking to Mobius when they go to the Renaissance Fair in Oshkosh, he says, "Well, why don't we just go back to before the variant?"
Yeah.
And he's like, "Well, we can't because it happens in real time." But to me, you exist outside of time, so thus all of other time is happening at the exact same moment.
Unless they don't exist out of time when they go in the timeline.
When they go in, this is correct. But before they go in, they should still exist outside of the timeline.
So why are you pruning from the back end as opposed to the front end?
Correct. And then also, when they have the emergency at the end,
unless if they prune from the front end, they kill the plant.
That would be my guess. Because my
that's how
thing
pruning
is
works on plants.
yeah, my guess is because as we watch those time bombs kind of go off, they kind of spread outwards. You have to prune from this end so that way it stops by the time it gets to the main timeline. Whereas if you did it at the main timeline, you'd probably cut into the actual main timeline and kill things you're not supposed to.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's more my thought on it.
Then that's a great explanation. I don't know enough about gardening. Yeah, no, but also it didn't seem like that. I mean, the only problem when the bombs go off, to me, seems like you don't have enough manpower because so many were going off at once. But I would think that you should be able to go back as many times after you deal with the first one to go back. But it's the whole real time thing.
I feel like the more times that you go back, the more unstable time is, I'm assuming.
Well,
but those things aren't part of the sacred timeline that they keep making, so that shouldn't disrupt that.
they continually talk about the longer that those things are allowed to progress.
As soon as they get to the red line.
As soon as they get to the red line, they become their own timelines and you lose the ability to prune. So my guess is that's really where the issue is you have to get to them before they get to creating their own timeline.
And I guess the issue that I have the most with the whole timeline and time travel part is the real time. Like, how does in real time exist since they live outside of time?
Because the timekeepers say it does.
Yeah, I mean that's literally what it is.
literally
It's
the
just the
answers.
drivers, or it's just the
And you
writers.
have to take their word for everything.
Yes.
Yeah.
You're in a cult.
Cool. That's why it kind of makes sense, because it's like it's a cult running the entire universe, so it makes sense because it's a cult. Like it makes sense for them, kind of thing. So my question is, how did the lizard people make one timeline? Like, how did they kill all these timelines? Is my curious thing on it.
that was going to be my next one, because I was like, because my thought is if the problem is that if it grows too much, you can't prune it. Does that mean that they've failed before and there exists another timeline, or what did they do?
Well, I thought,
like, how did they come to this conclusion that this exact points
They
is
went
where
to
you
the
can no
beginning
longer
of time,
prune?
and they just made sure there was no variance after that.
yeah. They went to the beginning of time, protected this timeline, but then they have that line where Loki's like, how does it end? And they're still weaving through it. And it's like...
Well, isn't that the same as the Fates, where they just keep weaving the chords together?
Well, maybe that is what it's like. It's like we have this abundant amount. We're gonna pick and choose which ones we want in our main timeline, and we still have all these knots and these yarn, but we're trying to thread it together into one big piece of yarn. It's the Weaver theory of time.
Yes.
There we go.
There you go.
Got it now.
No, but what I'm saying is that, so the TVA says it's got these two parallel lines for every time there's a variant. And if you reach those parallel lines, a new timeline has been created and you can no longer prune. Where did they determine how to put those? Like, they had to have failed to determine that, this is where we can no longer. So there has to exist.
What is the time?
Back in time, there has to exist, by definition, there has to exist some alternate timelines to the sacred timeline, because you had to have failed to know where you're pruning. Like, going back again to the garden metaphor, somebody somewhere had to have killed a plant by pruning too much to learn when and where to prune. So by definition, there are still more timelines than the sacred timeline, because the TVA had to fail to figure out where those pieces are.
Yeah.
You don't learn your barriers until you hit the barriers.
You don't know what regulations to have until people die because you don't have a regulation.
Exactly. Exactly.
Okay.
You didn't know you couldn't eat a Tide Pod until they put the warning, do not eat Tide Pods on the box.
Well, you didn't know you needed the warning until somebody ate one.
There you go. That's more accurate, yes.
I'm sure that as we spoke about it last week, we're going to, at the end of the series or season, you're just going to pull out and you'll see that there's someone above the lizard people, and they're just like Men in Black. They're just
Space
a
and time itself.
timeline that someone else is pruning. So
then the TVA has
infinite.
no power there, and there's going to be something else that's even bigger and stronger.
Well, I think I mentioned on Silver Surfer show they had space and time itself. Like time was a lady and space was a man, and it's just like we're space and time. We see everything. And then they had the Watchers too.
Yeah.
But I just like, are they pruning time? Like, I'm just picturing this blue lady like and snip snip.
I was gonna say, so does that make if the TVA is a cult, does that make the Watchers the like anthropologists that are like coming in and like observing the cult?
If they bring the Watchers in, Uatu and the Watchers. So okay, we
Which
have that.
they are for imagine what?
What if?
No, what do they call it? As
What if?
what if? Yes, I kept thinking as if, but that's not right. That's
I mean, we got to see them in Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2 in Stan Lee's
Yes.
cameo. So they exist in the canon already. We just haven't really talked to them. But yes, we will get Uatu talking to us in the What If animated series. Which, how is that going to tie into the TVA? It's going to be like, this happened at one point, but they pruned it back?
Oh,
Yeah.
no, maybe Uatu's going to pick up where, or What If is going to pick up where Loki ends, because as we saw in this episode, they did well. The variant caused a lot of damage to the timeline, and all these different branches just started going off, and it caused panic in the control room. Which, by the way, interesting Easter eggs, because you can see on those monitors where a lot of those went off. Some of them were well-known Marvel locations, like Vormir in the future, like 2350. Ego, sometime in the past, the Living Planet was bombed.
Well, we know
Nowhere.
that. I think we know one of the What If stories is what if Black Panther was Star-Lord or something like that? So what?
Yes.
So that could definitely, like, Ego coming to Earth, changing it up kind of thing.
Or Yondu picking up just some other kid because Star-Lord was never born. It's like, okay, we need the strongest Wakandan or something. I don't know.
Also, I thought it was very interesting when we got into Rock's cart that Loki, or at least the people who are creating the show or running the show, wanted to show us that he can use his magic right there. He uses it to dry himself off, right?
Yeah.
And they ask him about it. I think that meant something. Like, that's like, he's using his magic here. Something isn't right. Like, something else, he's going to be using it for something else in this particular that is going to come back later.
That's where I feel like as an audience member, it's like a reminder that this is not the Loki of the MCU. This is the other Loki. Because when that happened, I was like, did he actually try his clothes or is he lying right now? Kind of like Morbiusly, like, you're lying when they were at the Renaissance Fair. Kind of like, no, you're lying. Whereas that one, I was like, are you telling the truth or are you lying? And there seems to be a lot of moments within that supermarket scene where it's like, okay, Loki looks legit scared right now, so he clearly is not planned for this situation at all. But then clearly he is trying to manipulate as well. But you don't know if he's manipulating for the TVA just to see the lizard people or if he's manipulating to join this Loki or what. Like, it's just very like, I
You
like
can't
Loki,
trust the Lord of
but
Mischief.
You can't trust the Lord of Mischief. You just can't.
I think my favorite line was Mobius's, where he says, "Why is it that the least trustworthy people are always saying trust me?" And all I can think of is if you have class, you don't have to say it.
True.
Or if you have to say it, you don't have class. That
Yeah.
saying. So I'm like, sounds about right.
Both of those statements you just made, I feel like apply to such a specific person that I just don't even want to.
Which also made me think of, if you remember back in Thor the Dark World, when Loki is in his little prison cell on Asgard, Thor goes to talk to him and he looks pristine and all fine, but then like Thor says, get rid of the illusion, and he's actually, his room's all thrashed and he's messed up and stuff. So is he actually dry, or does he just appear to be dry? Because his reasoning was, I don't want my shoes to squeak when I'm trying to sneak up, but yet he keeps talking. So
Yeah, he keeps talking, but then you also have the Professor Loki moment where he's explaining the difference between illusion and duplication, which I absolutely adored as somebody
great.
that loves magic in general. So I feel like he actually is dry within that as opposed to the illusion that he's dry, because he's not trying to hide anything.
True.
Well, but then also
he's
he
also
could be
Loki.
trying to hide something. So it's very confusing. Actually,
See,
oh, go ahead.
I assumed the drawing was to remind us that outside the TVA, he can still use his magic.
yeah.
Yeah.
I think that was to, again, clue us in, okay, being in the timeline is separate from being at the TVA.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think they were trying to show us that distinction.
Okay.
Yeah, that could be it.
I mean, he'd already had that conversation earlier with Mobius, like, you're not worried that I have my own magic back, right? Kind of thing. But yes, a visual is a much better way.
Well, and to remind the TVA agents that he's got that ability now.
Which then brought me to with his fight with the enchanted guys in the shopping center. He is still Loki. He still has Asgardian strength. Like, how is this guy superpowered when all he is has mind control? Like this other guy, the guy that's punching him across the grocery store.
Well, it could be mind control past your human limits.
That's fair, but I
mean, that would be my argument. I don't know
Yeah.
if that's what it is, but
Well, or Loki's playing it safe because he doesn't know what the TVA is going to do and he doesn't want to come across as...
he could have defeated them, but didn't, kind of thing.
Well, or just like, if I kill this human, like, are they going to be pissed? Because he died outside of...
But that guy's
they're all
already destined
gonna-
to die.
Destined to die.
Destined to die anyway, which that was probably my favorite argument that Loki had, where it's like, it doesn't matter what you do because it's all going to end anyway.
There's
and just
no
go to
variance.
Pompeii and be like, I'm from the future. We are from the future, right? Like, that was
He doesn't
excellent.
answer him, though, which I thought was interesting.
No, he
Mobius
didn't.
does not answer him.
I feel like TVA is outside of time.
That's how I feel.
So
too,
it's not future or past. It's there.
What's that called? What's the end of time or that one point called? It usually has a name in all these stories and theories.
Oh my god!
It's in Chrono
It's not
Trigger.
the abyss. It's the.
Do you remember, John?
I can't remember.
Not what they call it in Chrono Trigger, but
Okay, it's not
Like-
important then.
like entropy or something like that.
It's like the in between place. Like telekinetic people can go to it and stuff like that. I just can't remember what it's called.
I feel like Roxcart would be the perfect place that Mobius could get himself a jet ski. Also, since all that stuff's supposed to be destroyed at that point,
Right?
anyways.
I know, right? Just
but
take a
there's
jet ski.
There doesn't seem to be any water at the TVA.
That's fair. I feel like they could probably just create it.
True.
But the fact that he could never have one, or he feels like he can never have one, because taking one outside of the timeline would then create a variant, because that jet ski should always be there.
Except that doesn't make sense because he continually brings back the trinkets for the judge.
I guess that's true. I don't know. I mean,
if you bring back a trinket from a place that's getting snipped out,
that's also
I
fair.
am sure somewhere in the 90s there was a jet ski that needed to be snipped out.
like in my head, Loki's just gonna be like, "Here, we're gonna go here, and it's gonna be right before a tsunami somewhere, and there's gonna be a jet ski,
Jet
and
ski.
he's gonna get Mobius on the jet ski,
Oh,
and jet ski around before the big."
The season
tsunami
is
comes.
going to end with Mobius going into his office, and there's going to be a jet ski with a bow on it. Like, it's going to happen.
Gosh, I hope so.
we all can bet on that one. The fact that the TVA at the end of it believes Loki is the one who caused Hunter B-15 to collapse instead of what actually happened, so they're still going after our Loki, so to speak.
Yeah.
Him running away obviously doesn't help, but is that where we're going to go? Is he just going to be on the run now? Or is that just going to be settled in the next episode?
I think it's going to be settled in the next episode because you expect it to be on the run.
Okay.
And here's my other thing. The TVA can't be that dense. Like, if you get to see all of the timeline, you should be able to see what has occurred. And you should be able to replay all of those conversations.
Which makes me think that the variant timelines or these branches that need to be pruned, they can't see
Yeah, they're unwatchable, and that's why they don't like them.
Well, except the thing is...
until it becomes a timeline.
Yeah.
Except as Loki points out, before these apocalyptic events, they're not variants. You don't see any variation because everything gets destroyed. So they can go back before the apocalypse and see what was going on.
That time they are safe to go back again.
And again and again and again and again.
Which also brings me to the point of Sylvie, or the variant. Shouldn't there be multiple versions of her at Roxcart at this point? Because we know that she came here at least once other time to grab Kablooey and give it to the kid.
Unless she was keeping them... Well, I don't know, yeah. Ooh.
Yeah, and then you've got the whole time paradox issues when that occurs.
Unless after this point where she walks through the door is when she's going to the church to take out those other TVA agents. Like, that's the problem with time travel.
Yeah.
See, I would imagine, though, that every time the variant goes back to one of these apocalyptic events, it's a new splinter of the timeline. So, like, the time that the variant was there and got the Kablooey doesn't exist anymore. It's like a reset.
Okay.
And she just kind of waits around again until the time is up, and then she can come back to that one again before it gets destroyed. But she's not going to run into herself because it's they're not going back into their own timeline like they do in Back to the Future, where they can see their past selves. Every new travel point is now like a new delineation, I think.
Well, it's because when she goes there, it's a branch, and then the apocalypse cuts off the branch. It prunes it like their machine does. So anytime she
creates
goes
a new
back,
branch.
she's just going back
Cool.
into the original timeline to create a new branch.
That explains
There
it.
you go.
Oh my gosh, they are doing a really good job. I know they said they would, but they're doing a great job. I can see the logic in all their time travel theory.
So then also, as our resident psych degree holder,
Oh no.
we have a scene where Loki, who obviously has huge father issues,
Huge.
does something that he believes is great and looks directly to Mobius, says, "Hey, I did a thing. Give me praise."
Yep. That's about accurate.
Like he really figures out that variants can hide in an apocalypse because that there's no time tolerance or variant tolerance that happens there. Can you go further into that?
No, you're pretty much on the nose.
It's
It's
just-
just straight up. I think Mobius reminds him of his brother too.
Okay.
Thor. So it's just very much, I guess, Loki is getting attached kind of thing, even though that was after the "you're just a scared little boy" comment from him too, which turned Mobius, I think, into authoritative figure, father figure to Loki.
Well, and since he's gotten attached, that's why he has to leave him at the end of this episode, because he
Yes.
has to know that he can still detach himself, still betray even the people that he cares about, and then
they'll still accept him
Yeah.
later on, or whether or not he can reach that point of no acceptance, but he never does.
I also really appreciated the line where he's fighting Sylvie, and she says, "Oh, no, don't call me that. Call me Harry."
Randy.
And he goes, "Now I get why Thor hated that."
I get it.
Like, yep,
I
that is
understand.
annoying.
Yeah.
I'm like, yes, sometimes you have to be presented with yourself to be like, oh, yeah, that
Ooh.
thing I do is really obnoxious.
There is another good line in it too, when Loki argues back against the scared little boy thing, and he says, "No, I'm just a person that knows that very bad people are not always very bad, and very good people are not always very good." And I absolutely adore that line.
Yup.
John, did you have another aspect you wanted to bring up?
Yeah, just how damn charming is Tom Hiddleston in this? Like, anytime he does that little smirk and head tilt, it's like, "Aw, you mischievous little scamp, you."
You can backstab
Just
me.
want to, give him rubs on the head, you know?
I also think that because since he's the first one to speak when he first interacts with a possessed B-15 by Sylvie, he establishes that Sylvie is supposed to be another Loki. And I think Sylvie just plays along with that. And that's why she gets upset when
He calls
her Loki. He's like, "No, don't call me that." Because I don't think
Yeah.
this is supposed to be Loki. I think it's supposed to be Sylvie. It's supposed to be someone else. And
Yeah, I think
Mobius
it's-
just got it wrong.
Because it seems like it's too early in the series. We're barely episode 2, and the stuff I thought we were going to be having towards the end happened here with the bombing of the timeline and the reveal of the alternate Loki. So yeah, these are not the reveals we think they are. This is leading to something even bigger still, which at this point, I'm all for it because this is what I was expecting, and now I don't know where they're going to go with it.
So
I'm like, all right, show me what comes next.
We only have 4 more episodes, so it's I think it's going to go pretty quick. Do we get to see any of the variant Lokis that we saw the holograms of, do you think?
I hope so.
Tom Hiddleston playing a big
I hope
oak.
he recruits them.
A bunch of Lokis in one room.
The Council of Lokis?
That seems highly dangerous.
Okay. Is there anything else that anybody would like to bring up?
I'd like to say I'm just very happy. I don't know what's happening. I can't predict it. And I think all the MCU shows and even movies do a pretty good job of twisting things enough. I think the most obvious one was probably Falcon and Winter Soldier, like knowing that.
Sam eventually becomes Captain America?
Well, no, not that one, because that was a given. Like,
Okay.
you knew that was going to happen, but the
Power
lady,
broker is
there we
Sharon?
go. Like, that was obvious. That I
yes.
was like, okay, she probably is it, kind of thing. But that was like the most obvious thing so far. Everything else has been fairly
Yeah.
surprising, and Loki more so. I have no idea what's gonna happen, and I like that. I don't like being able to predict stuff. So
Anything for you?
I have lots more questions, but I am feeling better about it.
Okay.
And I'm feeling a little more confident that I'm going to actually get answers to a lot of the questions that I figured they were just going to like ignore.
Okay.
I don't know that I'm necessarily going to like the answers, but I do have more confidence that I will actually get answers.
yeah,
John?
Just wanted to point out that one of the Lokis looked like he won the Tour de France,
Yeah.
and that's just such an odd little thing to throw in there.
I think I would think that it's because of so much doping scandal that happens around the Tour de France. That's why they threw that in there, but that's just me. So I don't know.
That's some Loki level mischief.
Yeah, exactly. I guess I am excited. This episode didn't do so much for me as the first episode did, but I do have, I guess, faith that this season is going to just be pretty awesome. So I'm all for it. Can't wait to see what we get next. All right. If you have some theories or things you'd like to chime in about this episode, please reach out to us. You can find me on Twitter. I am at Mitchipedia, GEM. GEM stands for Geek Elite Media. Jessica, where can people find you online?
you can find me Twitter as JM Bailey Writes.
John?
You can tweet me on the Twitter at Magic Bollocks and let me know if you think Batman's a real hero or not.
Oh, okay.
Okay, we're bringing that one back for the ending. That was great. It wasn't surprising. Stop acting like you're surprised.
Elizabeth?
You can find me with the rest of Geek Elite Media at Geek Elite Media and our Facebook page /Geek Elite Media.
Check out our website, geekelitemedia.com, for archived episodes of this podcast and other podcasts on our network. Check out our Patreon, patreon.com/geekelitemedia, for exclusive things that you can only get if you're one of our patrons. And whatever podcatcher you use to listen to us, please rate and review us so that we can help spread the word of the network. But until next time, this is the Geeks Watch on the Geek Elite Media Network, saying always remember to geek out.
Geek out.
This concludes our broadcast. Beep.